The great hall of the Galactic Coalition buzzed with excitement. Beings from 1,000 worlds gathered, their many eyes, tentacles, and sensors all focused on the large stage. Today was no ordinary meeting. Today, the High Council would make an announcement that would change everything. Ambassador Kim Ta stood quietly near the back. As one of the few humans in the room, he tried not to draw attention. Humans were still new to the stars. Earth had joined the coalition only 23 years ago, in 2134. Many of the older species still looked down on humans as simple creatures who had barely learned to leave their own planet. "You seem nervous," said Dr. Kim Hana, his wife, and the lead scientist of the human delegation. She stood beside him, her dark eyes watching the crowd. "I am," Tai admitted. "When the council calls an emergency meeting like this, it's never for good news." The lights dimmed. The room fell silent. 5 tall figures glided onto the stage, each from a different corner of the galaxy. These were the High Council members, the leaders of the 5 oldest species in known space. The center figure, tall and wrapped in flowing blue robes, raised 4 of its 6 arms. "Esteemed members of the coalition," it said, its voice deep and smooth, "we have detected something of great importance." The wall behind the stage lit up with a giant image. There, floating in space, was a strange object. It looked like a box, but with no straight lines. Its surface shifted and moved, covered in symbols and patterns that seemed to change even as they watched. "This," said the council member, "is the celestial enigma. An artifact from before any of our civilizations existed." Gasps filled the room. Tai leaned forward. Even humans knew about the enigma. It was a legend, a myth. A puzzle box said to contain knowledge so powerful it could lift a species to new heights of technology and understanding. "We believed it was just a story," continued the council member. "But 3 days ago, it appeared in the heart of the Andromeda galaxy. Our sensors confirm it is real." The image zoomed in, showing more detail of the shifting patterns. They seemed almost alive, pulsing with light and energy. For thousands of years, legends have told that any being who solves the enigma will gain knowledge beyond imagination. Any species that produces such a solver will be elevated to a special status in the cosmos. Now the room erupted in excited chatter. Status was everything in the coalition. Higher status meant better planets, more resources, greater say in decisions. "We hereby announce that the Enigma Challenge is open to all coalition species," declared the council member. "We have created perfect copies for study. Access will be granted to qualified scientists and scholars." As the announcement continued, Hannah noticed Ta's communicator blinking. "Someone's calling you," she whispered. Tai checked the message and frowned. "It's about Jin. His teacher says he's not in class." Again. Hannah sighed. Their 12-year-old son was brilliant but restless. School bored him, especially the Coalition Academy, where most teachers barely understood humans and their ways of learning. "I'll find him," she said, slipping away from the crowd. Dr. Hannah found Jin exactly where she expected, in the observation deck of their embassy ship, the Earthrise. He sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the stars through the giant window. "You missed school again," she said, sitting beside him. Jin didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the small tablet in his hands. "School is boring," he said, "but this isn't." Hannah looked at his screen. On it was the image of the enigma, the same one being shown in the Great Hall. Somehow, Jin had tapped into the live feed. "Everyone says it's impossible to solve," Jin said quietly. "But I see things in the patterns. Look." His small fingers traced lines on the screen, connecting symbols that seemed random to Hannah. "It's like it's talking," he said, "not with words, but with feelings." Hannah watched her son's face, the way his eyes lit up as he studied the ancient puzzle. A chill ran down her spine. "Jin," she said slowly, "would you like to see it closer? A real copy of it?" The boy finally looked up at her, his eyes wide with wonder. "More than anything," he whispered. 3 weeks passed since the announcement of the celestial enigma. Across the galaxy, the greatest minds of every species worked day and night to solve the ancient puzzle. The Coalition created perfect copies and sent them to major research centers. News stations showed nothing else. Everyone talked about the Enigma and what secrets it might hold. In the human embassy ship Earthrise, Jin sat alone in his room. His walls were covered with drawings. His floor was littered with models made from clay, paper, and whatever else he could find. All of them showed the same thing, the Enigma with its ever-changing patterns. Jin had not gone to school in these 3 weeks. At first, his parents were angry. Then they were worried. Now they just watched him with growing wonder. "He sees things in it that I can't," Dr. Hannah told her husband as they stood in the doorway of Jin's room. "Things that even the ship's computers can't detect." Jin sat on the floor, eyes closed, fingers tracing patterns in the air. He had been doing this for hours. "Jin," his father called softly. "It's time for dinner." The boy's eyes opened slowly, as if waking from a deep sleep. "I almost had it," he said. "There's a rhythm to the patterns, like music without sound." Tai and Hannah exchanged worried looks. Their son had always been different, quieter than other children, more thoughtful. But this obsession with the Enigma was something new. "Come eat," Hannah said. "Then we can talk about what you found." At the dinner table, Jin barely touched his food. His mind was still with the puzzle. "The adults are all doing it wrong," he said suddenly. "They're trying to solve it with math and physics. But that's not what it wants." "What does it want, Jin?" Tai asked, curious despite his concern. Jin looked up, his eyes bright. "It wants you to feel it. The patterns change based on emotions. I can see it in the broadcasts when different beings stand near it." Hannah leaned forward. "You mean the puzzle responds to emotional states? That's unusual. Most advanced species in the Coalition have moved beyond emotional responses. They consider emotions primitive. That's why they can't solve it," Jin said with the simple confidence of a child. "They're too busy being smart to see what's right in front of them." Tai rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Jin, would you like to see the real Enigma? Not just pictures or videos, but a real copy?" Jin's eyes grew wide. "Can we? Please." "There's a replica at the Central Archive. As an ambassador, I could arrange a visit. It would be educational, at least." Jin jumped from his seat, nearly knocking over his drink. "When can we go?" "Tomorrow." "Can we go tomorrow?" His parents laughed at his excitement. It was good to see him acting like a child again. "I'll see what I can do," Ta promised. Later that night, while Jin finally slept, Tai made calls to arrange the visit. It wasn't easy. The Central Archive was restricting access to senior researchers and scientists from high-status species. Humans were still considered too new, too emotional, too unpredictable. "I'm calling in every favor I have," Tai told Hannah as they prepared for bed. "But I think I can get us in tomorrow. Just a short visit." "Do you really think Jin sees something in the patterns?" Hannah asked. "Or is this just a child's imagination?" Ta considered this. "I don't know, but I've learned not to underestimate our son. He thinks differently than most people, human or alien. And maybe that's exactly what's needed here." The Coalition would never accept that a human child solved what their best minds couldn't, Hannah said softly. "Maybe not," Tai agreed. "But I want to give Jin the chance to try. He deserves that much." That night, Jin dreamed of the Enigma. In his dream, the box opened like a flower, revealing not technology or weapons, but light, beautiful, warm light that spoke without words. He woke up with tears on his face, but couldn't remember why. Tomorrow, he would see the real thing. Tomorrow, everything would change. The Central Archive was the largest building Jin had ever seen. It rose like a giant crystal mountain above the Coalition's capital city. Thousands of beings from hundreds of species moved in and out of its many doors. This was where the Coalition kept its most important knowledge and treasures. "Stay close," Ambassador Kim Tai told Jin as they passed through the main entrance. Dr. Hana walked on Jin's other side, her hand on his shoulder. Our guide should be waiting for us. Jin could barely contain his excitement. His eyes darted everywhere, taking in the massive halls filled with artifacts and data screens. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved around them, most giving the humans curious or dismissive looks. "Ah, the Earth delegation," said a cool voice. A tall, thin being approached them. It had pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Its 4 eyes blinked in different patterns, and its mouth was a small line that barely moved when it spoke. "I am Thor, senior researcher of Eclurian origin," it said. "I have been assigned to guide you today." Jin could tell right away that Thor didn't want to be their guide. The alien's voice was stiff, and its upper eyes kept looking past them, as if hoping to find someone more important. "Thank you for making time for us," Ta said politely. "This is my wife, Dr. Kim Hana, and our son, Jin." Thor's gaze dropped to Jin, and all 4 eyes narrowed. "A child. The archive is not a playground, Ambassador. The Enigma replica is a serious research subject." "My son has shown great interest in the puzzle," Ta said firmly. "This is an educational visit." Thor made a sound that might have been a sigh. "Very well. Follow me. You have 1 hour." They walked through many hallways and up several moving platforms. Jin tried to remember the way, but soon was completely lost. Finally, they entered a large round room. In the center, floating above a metal stand, was the Enigma. Jin's heart beat faster. It looked just like the images he had studied, but being near it was different. He could feel something coming from it, a kind of hum that wasn't a sound. "This is an exact copy of the celestial Enigma," Thor explained in a bored voice. "It contains all the same patterns and energy signatures as the original. Over 300 leading scientists are currently studying it, and others like it. But so far, no progress has been made in understanding its mechanism." Jin stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the shifting patterns. "Please maintain a distance of 2 meters from the artifact," Exor said sharply. "Why?" Jin asked. "Does it do something if you touch it?" Thor blinked rapidly. "It does nothing. But the rules state, if it does nothing, why can't we touch it?" Jin asked. "Those are the rules," Thor repeated, clearly annoyed. Jin nodded but kept looking at the puzzle. After a moment he asked, "Has anyone tried feeling sad while looking at the North Quadrant patterns?" The question seemed to confuse Exor. "What?" "The patterns on that side," Jin pointed. "They change when someone feels sad nearby. I saw it in the broadcasts, when that Mantodian scientist was talking, and he seemed sad about something. The patterns moved differently." Thor stared at Jin, then at the puzzle. "Emotional states are not relevant to solving the Enigma. We use pure logic and advanced mathematics." "Maybe that's why no one has solved it yet," Jin said quietly. 2 other researchers had entered the room and were listening to their conversation. One of them, a human woman with gray-streaked black hair, stepped forward. "That's an interesting observation," she said to Jin. "I'm Lee Song, Xenolinguistics Department. Would you mind explaining what you mean?" Thor seemed displeased by the interruption, but said nothing as Jin eagerly explained his theory about how the Enigma responded to emotions. Lee Song listened carefully, asking questions that showed she was taking him seriously. "The boy sees patterns where none exist," Kexor said dismissively. "Human imagination." "Perhaps," Lee Song replied. "Or perhaps imagination is exactly what's needed here." She turned to Tai and Hannah. "Would you permit your son to return tomorrow? I'd like to run some tests with him present." Before they could answer, an alarm sounded throughout the archive. Thor's communication device lit up. "Emergency gathering," the alien announced. "All senior staff. Something has happened with the original Enigma." The mood in the room changed instantly. "What is it?" Hannah asked. Thor was already heading for the door. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's big." The next day, Jin returned to the archive with his parents. The emergency from yesterday had been strange. The original enigma had suddenly glowed brighter for 10 minutes, then returned to normal. No one knew why. Li Song met them at the entrance. Her kind eyes and warm smile made Jin feel welcome, unlike Toer's cold stare. "Thank you for coming back," she said. "I've arranged for us to have the replica room to ourselves for 3 hours." As they walked, Li explained that she had been studying the enigma for months with no progress. "But your idea about emotions affecting it, that's not something anyone has tested." The replica room was empty today except for 2 other researchers. One was a young human woman with short hair. "This is Yun Ju," Li said. "She's our quantum physics expert." Yun nodded politely. "I heard about your theory. It's unconventional." The other researcher was not human. He was very old, with skin like tree bark and eyes that glowed softly. He stood with the help of a floating chair. "And this is Krell," Li continued. "He's been studying the enigma longer than anyone else." 327 years, Krell said in a deep, slow voice, "and still it keeps its secrets." Jin looked at the old alien with wide eyes. "That's a very long time." Krell made a rumbling sound that might have been a laugh. "To you, perhaps. To my kind, I am barely in my middle years." They gathered around the enigma replica. Jin explained his ideas more fully, how he had noticed the patterns shifting differently when beings with different emotions were near it. "The main problem," Yun said, "is that most advanced species in the coalition have evolved past showing emotions. They consider feelings primitive, which is why they never noticed the connection." Hannah said, understanding. "Exactly," Li agreed. "But humans still express emotions strongly." "Jin, would you be willing to try an experiment?" Jin nodded eagerly. They set up special cameras and sensors around the enigma. Jin stood near it while Li asked him to think about different things. Happy memories, sad stories, things that made him scared or angry. To everyone's amazement, the patterns on the enigma shifted subtly with each emotional change. The changes were small, but the sensors caught them clearly. "Remarkable," Krell whispered, his old eyes wide. "In all my years." "It's responding to him," Yun confirmed, checking her instruments. "The energy patterns shift with his emotional state." Jin stepped closer to the puzzle, his eyes fixed on its shifting surface. "It's like it's talking," he said softly. "Not with words, but with feelings." "But what is it saying?" Tai asked. Jin tilted his head, studying the patterns. I think it's asking a question." "What question?" Li asked. "I'm not sure yet," Jin admitted. "But look here." He pointed to a section of the enigma where the patterns swirled in a complex dance. "When I feel curious, this part moves faster. When I feel sad, it slows down. It's reacting to me, but it's also teaching me." Jin began to draw in a notebook, copying the patterns he saw and making notes about how they changed. His small hands moved quickly, his eyes darting between the paper and the puzzle. "Jin has always seen the world differently," Hannah told the others quietly. "He notices patterns that others miss." "A valuable skill," Krell said. "My people believe that children sometimes see truth more clearly than adults. We lose something as we age and learn to think in established ways." For the next 2 hours, Jin worked with the enigma, testing different emotions and reactions. The others watched in growing excitement as he began to develop a kind of language for understanding the pattern changes. By the end of their time, Jin had filled his notebook with drawings and notes. His approach was unlike anything the scientist had tried. A mix of math, art, and emotional response. "I think I know how to start solving it now," Jin said as they prepared to leave. "It's not just one puzzle. It's many puzzles layered together, and each layer needs a different feeling to unlock it." As they walked out of the archive, none of them noticed the Veloxian observer who had been watching from the shadows. recording everything they did. News of Jin's progress spread quickly through the archive. By the next morning, many researchers wanted to see his work. Li Song had to create a special access pass for Jin to continue his studies. But not everyone was happy about it. Ambassador Park Min, the head of the human diplomatic mission, called Ta to his office. His face was serious when they arrived. "You've created a problem," Park said, not bothering with greetings. "The Veloxians are upset." Ta frowned. The Veloxians were one of the most powerful species in the coalition. They had been working on the Enigma for centuries. "What are they upset about?" Hannah asked. "Your son," Park replied. "They say he shouldn't be allowed near the Enigma. They've invested huge resources into solving it. Now they hear that a human child is making progress where their best minds have failed. Jin is just studying it," Tay argued. "Like everyone else." Park shook his head. "Not like everyone else. The Veloxians have lodged a formal complaint. They say humans are too emotional and unpredictable to be trusted with ancient knowledge." "That's ridiculous," Hannah said angrily. "It's politics," Park corrected her. "The Veloxians have many allies in the coalition. They want Jin's access revoked." "You can't do that to him," Ta said. "He's made real progress." Park sighed. "I don't want to, but I have to think about Earth's standing in the coalition. We can't afford to make enemies of the Veloxians." While the adults argued, Jin continued his work at the archive. Today, Li Song had brought him a new tool, a light projector that could mimic the Enigma's patterns. Jin used it to test his theories away from the actual replica. Krell watched him work, his ancient eyes thoughtful. "You see with fresh eyes," the old alien said. "My people have a saying, the newest leaf catches the most light." Jin smiled at that. He liked Krell. The old alien didn't talk down to him like most adults did. "I think I understand the first layer now," Jin told him, pointing to his drawings. "See how this pattern looks like a lock? And these smaller patterns are like keys, but they only work when you feel the right emotion while looking at them." "Fascinating," Krell said. "An emotional lock and key system." Their work was interrupted when a tall, silver-skinned being entered the room. Jin had never seen a Veloxian before, but he knew at once that this was one. The alien moved with perfect grace, its 4 arms held rigidly at its sides. "I am Draz, senior researcher of the Veloxian Science Academy," it said in a cold voice. "I am here to observe the human child's methods." Li Song stepped forward. "We weren't informed of any observation period." "It has been approved by your superiors," Draz replied, showing a pass. "The Veloxian delegation has concerns about allowing a child to access the Enigma." Jin felt uncomfortable under Draz's stare. The Veloxian's eyes were like silver coins, with no visible pupils. "The child may continue," Draz said, moving to a corner of the room. "I will merely watch." But Jin found it hard to concentrate with Draz watching. Every time he looked up, those silver eyes were fixed on him. By the end of the day, he had made very little progress. That night, back on the Earthrise, Jin told his parents about Draz. "I couldn't think right with him watching me," he said. "It was like he was waiting for me to fail." Tai and Hannah exchanged worried looks. They hadn't told Jin about the political problems his work was causing. "Maybe we should take a break from the archive for a few days," Hannah suggested carefully. Jin shook his head firmly. "No, I'm close to figuring out the first layer." "I know I am." Before Tai could respond, his communicator beeped. The message made his face go pale. "What is it?" Hannah asked. "Jin's access to the archive has been officially suspended," Ta said grimly. "By order of the Coalition Security Council. They cite security concerns about a human child working with ancient technology." Jin's eyes filled with tears. "But that's not fair. I was helping." "I know," Ta said, putting his arm around his son. "And we're going to fight this. I promise." What none of them knew was that during the night, someone would break into Li Song's lab and delete all of Jin's research data from the archive's computers. Jin sat on his bed, tears rolling down his face. All his work was gone. Someone had deleted everything from the archive computers. Even the paper notes he'd left in Li Song's lab had disappeared. "It's not fair," he whispered to himself. "I was so close." There was a knock at his door. Jin quickly wiped his eyes. "Come in." His parents entered, but they weren't alone. With them were Li Song, Yunju, and old Krell, floating on his chair. "We have visitors," Hannah said with a small smile. Jin sat up straighter. "Did you get my access back?" Ta shook his head. "Not yet, but our friends have news. The Veloxians think they've won," Li said, sitting beside Jin. "They believe that without your notes and without access to the Enigma, you can't continue your work." "They're right," Jin said sadly. "All my work is gone." Krell made a rumbling sound. "Not all, young human." The old alien reached into a pocket in his robes and pulled out a small data stick. "I made a copy of your work each day. I have done this for 3 centuries with all my research. The young never think to make backups." Jin's eyes went wide. "You saved my notes." "I did," Krell said, his eyes twinkling. "And more. I believe in what you are doing, child. You see with fresh eyes what the rest of us have missed for too long." Yunju stepped forward. "And I brought something too." She opened a case to reveal a small device. "This is a portable scanner that can create a holographic image of any object. I used it yesterday to make a perfect copy of the Enigma replica." Jin jumped off his bed in excitement. "So I can keep working." "Not just that," Li said. "We have something bigger planned, but it's risky." The adults looked at each other, and Ta nodded gravely. "The real Enigma," Li continued. "The original one. It's being moved tomorrow to a new research facility. During the move, there will be a 3-hour window when it will be relatively accessible. You want to take Jin to see the real Enigma?" Hannah asked, sounding worried. Krell nodded slowly. "I have served the Coalition for over 3 centuries. My voice still carries weight. I have requested permission for a final viewing of the Enigma before it is moved. As is my right, I may bring assistance." Jin could hardly believe what he was hearing. The real Enigma, not just a copy. "Yes," Krell said, "but we would have only a short time with it. And if we are caught doing anything more than observing, it would cause an incident," Tai finished. "Possibly harm Earth's standing in the Coalition." Jin looked at his father. "But you think I should do it?" Tai was quiet for a moment. "I think you have a gift, Jin. And I think the Enigma was meant to be solved by someone who sees the world differently. If that's you, then yes, I think you should try." "There's something else you should know," Li said. "The replicas, they're not perfect. There have always been small discrepancies between them and the original. Small energy patterns that couldn't be copied. The real Enigma might behave differently." Jin thought about this. "When would we go?" "Tomorrow morning," Yun said. "We'd need to leave the Earthrise at 500 hours. "That's very early," Jin said with a small smile. "Saving the galaxy doesn't wait for a good night's sleep," Yun replied, smiling back. Later, after everyone had left, Jin sat with his parents in their small living room. The mood was serious. "We're proud of you," Hannah said, holding his hand. "No matter what happens tomorrow." "I'm a little scared," Jin admitted. "What if I'm wrong? What if I can't solve it?" "Then you'll have tried," Ta said simply. "And that's all anyone can do." Jin nodded, feeling better. "I think I should sleep now. Tomorrow will be a big day." As he drifted off to sleep, Jin thought about the Enigma. Not the copies he had been studying, but the real thing waiting for him tomorrow. In his dreams, it called to him with patterns of light and feeling. Across the stars, the original Enigma pulsed gently, as if it too was waiting. The next morning came too soon. Jin felt like he had just closed his eyes when his father gently shook him awake. "It's time," Ta whispered. They moved quietly through the empty halls of the Earthrise. At this early hour, most humans were still sleeping. Jin yawned as they entered a small transport ship where Li, Yun, and Krell were waiting. "Ready?" Li asked. Jin nodded, though his stomach felt tight with nerves. The journey to the secure facility took nearly an hour. No one spoke much. Even Krell seemed tense, his ancient eyes fixed on the stars outside the window. "Remember," Li said as they approached, "Krell is leading this visit. We are all his assistants. Answer any questions simply and politely." The security check took a long time. Guards scanned them for weapons and recording devices. Jin had never felt so nervous. What if they were caught? What if the plan failed? But Krell's reputation was strong. The guards treated the old alien with great respect. Finally, they were led into a large round chamber. And there it was, the real celestial enigma. Jin's breath caught in his throat. The original was different from the copies. It seemed more alive somehow, its patterns shifting with a fluid grace the replicas couldn't match. It floated in the center of the room, surrounded by energy fields and sensors. "Elder Krell," said the guard captain, "you have 3 hours as requested. The transfer team will arrive after that time." Krell nodded solemnly. "Thank you. My assistants and I require privacy for our final observations." The guards left, though Jin knew they were watching through cameras. "Now," Krell said once they were alone, "we must work quickly." Jin approached the enigma carefully. Even from a distance, he could feel it responding to him. The patterns shifted as he drew near, almost like they were greeting him. "It's different," he whispered. The copies were missing so much. Yun set up her instruments, measuring the energy flowing from the puzzle. "The resonance patterns are much stronger in the original," she confirmed. "And there's something else, a kind of vibration that wasn't in the copies." Jin reached out his hand, stopping just short of touching the enigma. "Can I?" he asked Krell. The old alien hesitated. "It is forbidden to touch it directly." "But," he looked at the others, "we have already broken many rules to get here." Jin took a deep breath and placed his hand gently on the surface of the enigma. The effect was immediate. The pattern surged and swirled around his fingers. Jin gasped as he felt a tingling sensation move up his arm. "It's warm," he said in wonder, "and I can feel the vibrations now, like music." For the next hour, Jin worked with the enigma, applying what he had learned from the copies but adapting to the differences in the original. The others watched in amazement as he seemed to communicate with the ancient artifact, his expressions changing as he explored its patterns. "It's responding to him," Li whispered to Ta. "I've never seen anything like it." "Look at the energy readings," Yun added, showing them her scanner. "They're synchronized with Jin's heartbeat." Jin was lost in his work, unaware of their conversation. He had discovered that the enigma wasn't just responding to his emotions, it was guiding them. When he touched certain patterns, he felt specific feelings: joy, sadness, wonder, fear. Each emotion led to new patterns emerging. "It's a map," he said suddenly. "Not just a puzzle. It's showing me a path." Before anyone could ask what he meant, an alarm sounded. Red lights flashed around the room. "What's happening?" Hannah asked, moving closer to Jin. The doors slid open. Draz entered, flanked by several Veloxian guards and Coalition security officers. "This visit is terminated," Draz announced coldly. "The human child is interfering with the enigma in violation of Coalition law." "He's done nothing wrong," Li protested. "The council has convened an emergency session." Draz continued as if she hadn't spoken. "A ruling on this matter will be made within 24 hours. Until then, the human will be removed from this facility." Jin looked at the enigma, then at Draz. "I just need a little more time. I'm so close." "The session begins in 24 hours, Draz repeated. "You have until then to prepare your defense." The Veloxian's silver eyes narrowed. "Though I doubt it will matter." 23 hours later, Jin sat in a small room near the council chambers. His parents, Li, Yun, and Krell, were with him. They had spent the entire time preparing for the hearing, but Jin's mind was elsewhere. "I need to go back to the enigma," he said for the 10th time. "I know how to solve it now." "The Veloxians have made sure you won't get access again," Ta said sadly. "They've convinced half the council that humans are dangerous." Jin shook his head. "But I saw the path. When I touched it, I understood. The enigma isn't just a puzzle or a map. It's alive in some way." Ambassador Park entered the room, his face grim. "It's time," he said. "The council is ready." They walked together to the great council chamber. Hundreds of beings from many worlds filled the seats. At the center, the 5 high council members sat in a half circle. Before them, on a floating platform, was the enigma itself. Jin's heart jumped at the sight of it. Even from across the room, he could feel its pull. Draz stood at a speaker's platform. "Esteemed council," the Veloxian began, "we face a serious breach of protocol. This human child has manipulated an ancient artifact of unknown power. Such reckless behavior could endanger us all." Whispers filled the chamber. Jin felt many eyes on him, most unfriendly. "The Veloxian Science Academy has studied the enigma for centuries," Draz continued. "We understand its complexity. A primitive species like humans, and a child no less, cannot be allowed to interfere with forces beyond their comprehension." When Draz finished, Krell moved forward to speak. His old voice was stronger than Jin had ever heard it. "I have studied the enigma for more than 300 years, Krell said. "In all that time, no one has made the progress this child has made in just a few days. Perhaps what we need is not more knowledge, but a fresh perspective." The council listened respectfully to Krell, but Jin could tell they were not convinced. One by one, others spoke, some supporting Jin, most against him. Finally, the lead council member raised a hand for silence. "We will now deliberate," it announced. "All parties will." "Wait," Jin said, standing up. His voice sounded small in the huge chamber, but everyone turned to look at him. Tai tried to pull him back. "Jin, this isn't the time." But Jin stepped forward. "Please," he said to the council, "let me try one more time with the enigma. Right now, in front of everyone." The chamber erupted in voices. The council members spoke quietly among themselves. "This is highly irregular," the lead member finally said. "But given the circumstances, very well. You may approach the enigma, but do not touch it." Jin walked slowly to the center of the chamber. The enigma floated before him, its pattern swirling faster as he approached, almost as if it recognized him. "I need to touch it," Jin said. "That's the only way." More voices rose in protest, but Krell spoke over them. "Let the child try. What harm can come from it?" After more discussion, the council reluctantly agreed. Jin stepped onto the platform with the enigma. Yun followed him, carrying equipment to monitor his vital signs. "Be careful," she whispered. Jin nodded, then turned to face the enigma. The chamber fell silent as he placed his hands on specific points of the artifact, just as he had discovered he should. Immediately, the patterns began to shift and flow around his fingers. Jin closed his eyes, focusing on the feelings the enigma was guiding him towards. First wonder, then sadness, then joy, then curiosity. Each emotion in a specific sequence. His heart rate and brain waves are synchronizing with the enigma's energy patterns, Yun announced, her voice filled with awe. The patterns on the enigma began to glow brighter. They spread beyond its surface, filling the air around Jin with shifting lights. Some people in the chamber gasped. Others moved back in fear. "What's happening?" the lead council member demanded. "He's solving it," Krell said simply. "He's doing what none of us could do." Jin felt the final piece fall into place. A feeling of perfect peace filled him as the enigma's patterns aligned with his own thoughts and emotions. The artifact rose higher, spinning slowly, its glow intensifying until everyone had to shield their eyes. When the light faded, the enigma had changed. What had been a closed, mysterious object was now open like a flower in bloom, revealing a core of pulsing light. Jin opened his eyes and smiled. "It wasn't a test of knowledge," he said softly. "It was a test of connection." The enigma had been solved. The council chamber was completely silent. Everyone stared at the open enigma and the small human boy who had solved it. The core of the ancient puzzle glowed with a soft blue light that filled the entire room. Then something amazing happened. The light began to take shape, forming a hologram in the air above Jin. It showed beings unlike any in the coalition. Tall, graceful creatures with 4 arms and large eyes that seemed to shine with inner light. "Greetings," said a gentle voice that everyone heard in their own language. "We are the Onrai. Long ago, our civilization reached the height of its knowledge. We created the enigma as a test for those who would follow us." Jin looked up at the hologram in wonder. These were the creators of the puzzle, a species that had vanished from the galaxy millions of years ago. "For eons, we watched as young civilizations grew," the voice continued. "Many became powerful. Many gained vast knowledge. But too often, they lost something precious along the way." The hologram changed to show various worlds and species, some that still existed, others long extinct. As societies grew more advanced, many chose to set aside their emotions. They saw feelings as primitive, as weaknesses to overcome. But in doing so, they lost half of what makes intelligence truly powerful. Draz and the other Galaxians shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew they had engineered emotion out of their species centuries ago, considering it a step toward perfection. The enigma was designed to be solved only by a mind that could balance logic with emotion, analysis with intuition, a mind that could think and feel at the same time. The hologram showed images of Jin working with the puzzle, his face showing concentration and wonder and joy. This child succeeded where others failed because he did not try to solve the enigma with knowledge alone. He connected with it. He understood that true wisdom requires both the mind and the heart. Jin felt his parents' hands on his shoulders. He looked up to see tears in his mother's eyes and pride in his father's face. "And now, as promised, we offer a gift to the species that solved our puzzle." The chamber filled with murmurs. This was the moment everyone had waited for, the ancient knowledge that would elevate a species to new heights of power. The hologram changed again, showing not weapons or technology as many had expected, but images of different beings from across the galaxy working together, sharing ideas, creating wonderful things. "Our gift is not a technology or a weapon," the voice said. "It is a truth we learned too late in our own development. True advancement comes not from power, but from connection. Not from knowledge alone, but from wisdom." The light from the enigma spread through the chamber, touching everyone present. Jin felt a strange warmth flow through him, and he somehow knew that everyone was feeling the same thing, a moment of perfect understanding of each other. "We offer you the beginning of a path," the voice continued, "a way to combine the logical strengths some species have developed with the emotional intelligence others have preserved. Together, these create something greater than either alone." As the light faded, the enigma closed again, returning to its original form, but with a soft glow that remained. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Krell stepped forward. "In 300 years of study," the old alien said, "I suspected this might be the truth. The oldest and wisest civilizations always balance knowledge with compassion, logic with creativity." The lead council member rose. "This is not what we expected," it admitted, "but perhaps it is what we needed." In the days that followed, things changed quickly. The council voted to create a new position, Ambassador of Perspective, and asked Jin to be the first to hold it. His job would be to help bridge the differences between species, to remind everyone that different ways of thinking were not weaknesses but strengths. The Veloxians were unhappy at first, but even they could not deny what had happened. Some of their younger members began to question their society's rejection of emotion. On the Earthrise, Jin looked out at the stars with his parents. "Do you think the Onrai are still out there somewhere?" he asked. "Perhaps," Ta said, "or perhaps they left their wisdom behind because they knew someday someone like you would find it." Jin smiled. The enigma had been solved, but he knew the real puzzle, how to bring all the different species together, was just beginning. And somehow, he knew that this was a puzzle that would take many minds and many hearts working together to solve.